Hey everyone, hope you're all enjoying DevCon and the great sessions that you have attended so far. Looking at the agenda and the speakers, there are a lot of great sessions, and I bet you were surprised by my session title. But before I dive into it, let me just quickly intro myself. So I'm Bhaskar Sunkara, most recently the CTO at AppDynamics. I'm based in the Bay Area, but I started my career in India, actually. So with a startup out of Hyderabad called Pramati. I was there for about 5 years or so, and then I moved to the Bay Area to a company called Wiley, which at that time was one of the leading companies in application performance management. So that's where I got into APM. And then obviously it was about 10 plus years of AppDynamics, which was a fantastic run. Very proud of the business we built there. And then we sold to Cisco in 2017. After that, I was with AppDynamics for a little bit, but I took a little bit of a break, and then I recently started something, which I might or might not talk about in this talk. And since the concept of DevOps started, it was first coined, there's been numerous thought leadership articles that that tell you to be data-driven. And there are lots of definitions of what DevOps really means. And for some, it's pushing quality code faster. For some, it's really about doubling down on SLAs and SLOs. But my view and the view that I've taken for the session is that it's about linking software development and engineering to the business, ensuring that the software you build is your business and your business is your software. That's how closely linked they are right now. I also have no doubt that if you're doing DevOps really well today, you're focusing on metrics such as deployment frequency, lead time, change failure rate, mean time to restore, and all the other great metrics that DevOps really has. And these are great at measuring how well you're adopting a DevOps culture. So obviously you should keep doing them, and these are very essential and give you a good measure of how well you're doing it. But I guess the thing I was really thinking about was, do they really highlight the value that your custom software, that every commit or change is driving for the business? Do they really lead to figuring out your competitive advantage in a software-driven company? So that is what I was going to cover. I was going to talk a little bit about my views from my experience. What's data, what's information, what's insight, how are they sort of linked together, plus some recommendations. So the first thing I want to state, and you might have heard this before, is that data doesn't equal information, and information does not equal insight. So I'm going to actually cover the session based off of these three topics, and really focus on each one of these, the definition of these, and then break them down. So first of all, let's start with data. What is data, right? And if you really think about any software business, right, when you think about what data means in that context, we have data everywhere with respect to the software-driven business and the metrics that we get. But if you break it down, they're really two distinct silos of data. So first we have a silo of all the live streaming data that is coming directly from your custom software, from the application that you build, that is really serving the business, right? So the speeds, the feeds, the application metrics, the infrastructure metrics, the cloud metrics, the network data, and you kind of see on the right on all of those, right? Then the other piece of data is the business data, which is a little more static, which doesn't change, it's not as dynamic, but it's held in system of record solutions such as CRM systems, product databases, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these are data points that are about customers, partners, product, suppliers, et cetera. Now, the key question is, can any of these distinct data points be used to infer something? And what's the correlation? To tell you about what is happening in context to make an accurate decision when you're running a software business. So for example, if you look at memory usage, if you look at disk utilization, if you look at average response time, those will tell you things in isolation. If you look at, customer type, if you look at, merchant type, obviously gives you metadata, but it's how they combine together that actually helps you making decisions. So let's break this down a little further. So in any software-driven business, if you think about the definition of data, this is metrics or attributes that define or indicate the status of an entity. And what that means is when you're talking about a specific entity, you can't really use them in isolation for decision making, and that's really the key point with respect to data. Now, if you go on to information, what is information then? Well, in the software-driven world, it's all about how you take data and then you turn it into facts of something of importance. So that's how I would define information. And in any software-driven business, again, there are a growing number of analytics and monitoring solutions that can help with this, right? So, for example, you kind of look at all the analytic solutions, all the metric-based solutions, but when it comes to so let's look at the two silos again to start looking at all of these tools. When it comes to live streaming data that comes from software, from web, it could be from web, it could be from mobile, it could be from IoT applications. There are product usage, analytics solutions, performance management, observability, infrastructure monitoring, log analytics, all of those platforms. Now, these do a great job of taking technical data and turning it into facts, right? And when it comes to business data, for example, this area could be usage of a particular service, how a particular API is doing, how sort of the load, errors, all of those key signals, golden signals, etc. Now on the left, when it comes to business data, and there are a variety of CRM, subscription management, and ever increasing number of BI solutions that let you take business data and turn it into facts, right? So now if you look at the type of queries, the type of reports that you can get, there's a couple of examples, right? So the area on the right helps you answer questions such as, is usage and performance as expected? So that's kind of for the software layer. And if you look at the left, then you start thinking about creating reports that show who, let's just say the top 3 lifetime value customers are renewal. So these are all obviously business terms. And the BI solutions are great at creating after the fact reports, right? And product usage, APM, and technical observability are answering questions on usage and performance. So if you take both these sets of solutions, they're great at helping you make decisions and taking actions in the particular silos, right? Now, so if you summarize information based off of that, it is data that has been processed, aggregated, and organized in regards to a domain entity or a series of domain entity events. So that's sort of also looking at correlation. You can start going into root cause analysis and stuff like that, and then make fixes, make changes, and then it can be used for domain-specific decision making. Now, the key problem here is the fact that information and solutions that create information can only be used for making decisions in either silos that I talked about, that I showed you in the last slide. But again, my thesis right now is software is your business, and your business is software with respect to these data silos. So is this enough to drive the right, correct actions with respect to a software-driven business? And that's what I want to dive in more into. So now let's start looking at insights, and which is why we have to be, and the reason why we have to be insight-driven, and how we strive for actionable insights when you're operating something and when you're really running a software-driven business. And this is relevant not only to obviously business professionals, but also developers and everybody related to running the business, whether you're building it, whether you're operating it, no matter what team you're in. So now let's start looking at insight, right? And how would I define an insight? Well, first of all, the key thing, the first aspect of this is that it's about context, right? Between both the software and the business silo. For example, it's not a user impacted by a software issue, it is a customer. And a customer usually has some metadata, when did they sign up, when are they going to renew, a whole bunch of other factors there. The second part is that it has to be continuous, right? It's not about building dashboards. So if you have hundreds of different segments of customers, tens of different segments of partners, etc. You can't obviously be staring at 100 different dashboards and trying to manually make decisions. It's about continuous operationalized insights that go to the right teams at the right time. And how do you then automate the process and automate some of the decision making and observe patterns, right? Thirdly, the insights must provide full clarity. What does it mean for the business and your customers, for your team and for your software? So enough actionability in terms of that. So that's the final point, which is all of this is driving action. Only this way can it drive the right action based on contextual facts rather than opinion, which we all know happens so many times, right? Like I've been through multiple incidents, especially when working through App Dynamics and working with many customers using the tool where we face this situation. So now let's just take an example to make this clearer on what I mean by insight. So take the following scenario. So let's just say you want to answer this question. Tell me when Platinum customers are experiencing usage issues with our latest release, right? So pretty straightforward question if you start thinking about a business being run by software. So based on that, what do we have to do here? So firstly, we need to correlate different business metadata points. So for example, take stuff about the customer, the subscription, the product that they're using, and any kind of metadata about it. And then you have to understand the usage issue of, is it a technical issue that we have to correlate it back to the data points at the same time regarding the changes, or any changes that you put into the software, into a release, and then be able to seamlessly correlate this data together to answer this scenario. And then, because if you notice in the question, we're saying, tell me when, right? It's not about creating a report or a dashboard that I can look at manually and I'll pull it up. But there are hundreds of these questions potentially that you're answering as you're running a business. So it needs to be a little more immediate, a little more actionable, which is I want an immediate Slack or Teams notification when this is happening in real time. So that's kind of the key point here. So this is, again, correlating all of this and then coming up with this, and not in a report fashion, but more in sort of a real-time operationalized fashion. In fact, you really want to go further than that. What you want to do is automatic action to be taken, because these are patterns that happen in business every day, right? So what you want to do is you want to create a task in Salesforce or take an action in your help desk software to offer an apology, because in the software-driven business, the most important thing for you is customer experience, and you want to be on top of it, and you don't want to, again, do that post the fact or after the fact. This is basically what I mean by insight. So any actionable insight in this context would actually be automated and would be sent to the right person so that you're acting on it, and that's what would be ideal for the business. Now let's think about building a solution like that. How do we kind of bring some of this together? And it's not easy, but I know a lot of customers, a lot of companies who are actually doing this on their own. There's a lot of DIY in the industry right now, which is kind of doing something similar to this. So firstly, what you need to do is build the foundation. So basically get all of your data from the business side, from the software side, normalize it into a central place, a data warehouse or a data lake or something like that, right? Then the next thing is you need to, now you have the raw data, The next thing is you need to transform this data by correlating it together, right? And this isn't easy because your software is constantly changing. You're doing new releases, you're adding more services, and changing functionality and things like that. So especially your live streaming software data. So once you are able to correlate it, then to enable actionable insights, you have to then implement things like machine learning to know what's going on, so that situational drill downs can be automatically created. Now, if you find some of this data interesting, which you need to push back into some other tools, like sort of adding a task in CRM systems, etc., you'll have to do reverse ETL so that the relevant systems are acted on, and then having APIs that can trigger an automatic response, or even if it's sort of human aided, etc. So again, the complexity of this is pretty high. And it's definitely not easy, but like I mentioned, many companies are trying to do this approach, do this yourself. And there's no real holistic approach for all of this, right? So that there are many. If you look at the tools, right, there's obviously super mature data warehouses, whether it's Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, etc. And they're great for storing data at scale, doing the queries, building the reports on them, and they're very powerful sort of, data layers. And then you go a layer high above that. There's a lot of complexity in binding all of this together. You basically need data scientists, and you have the data engineering team that puts all this together, and it's a lot of effort and it's a lot of investment from the companies. And then finally, there are actually some tools that do sort of start combining these areas together. So there are categories like product-led growth CRM companies. There are tools that focus purely on customer retention that help customer success teams. There's also reverse ETL teams that focus on automating data changes and then putting them back into system of record solutions such as Salesforce, creating a task, and all of that stuff, right? But again, there's nothing super actionable. And I think most importantly, there's nothing really targeted towards DevOps in how they can actually harness all of what's going on and basically have like a good feedback loop with respect to that. So what can you do today? Well, firstly, I hope this session has been super useful for you. It's really time to shift your thinking from being data-driven to insight-driven. And what does that mean? Is having business and software data in context. And having a continuous delivery of insights versus dashboards and reports. It's basically having every insight having clarity to drive the right action. So that's the key point here. Secondly, I'm sure you're doing this already, especially when you're instrumenting your code, whether it is logging or whether it's any other type of data collection. Be sure to keep instrumenting your code or software with business metadata. That obviously helps you bind more of these things together. And thirdly, actionable insights is a big problem in any major software-driven business today. So be on the lookout for new digital operations platforms. This is probably what I was referring to in the beginning of the session in terms of what I'm working on right now. Bicycle is a digital operations platform, and feel free to reach out to me if you want any further info. And that was pretty much it. Again, thanks for your time, and I hope this was useful for you. Thanks.